wasted nights, you piss them all away. Little children in the street, dying every day. We all look for something we can never find, and we all need peace of mind. Lonely wretch on the street, looking for love. $20 beneath the sheets. Is this all she thinks of? We all look for something.
Hey, Timmy, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, pretty good here. Hey, we had a pretty good podcast last week, and had a lot of questions, turnout, and stuff like that. And looking at our videos, so we were coming back one more time with a special guest. Go ahead and let's.
Yeah, well, this is the first time. I'll tell you, we
Yeah.
have 157 podcasts right now,
Yeah,
and this is the first time that we had a podcast where we talked about a topic, and then followed up the same topic with another guest. So we had Liz Joy on last week talking about Proposition 1, hot topic, right? Over 400
Yep.
emails from people asking us, what is our position on Proposition 1? My position is I wanted to have Liz come on, and our next special guest is our Assemblyman John McDonald. He's been on the show before, and I'm sure he's well versed in the proposition. And so let's just jump right into it and get him on the show here. Jump on. John, are you around? There you
I
are.
am here. I am
How you
here.
doing?
welcome, John.
I am on the stage, is what I was told by the message.
Well, you're back now. You're in the show.
There you go. Very good.
So
Very
welcome.
Good.
So,
Yes. it's good to be back.
when I talked to you the other day, I explained to you that, the Proposition 1, hot topic, right? One side thinks it's the worst thing in the world. The other side's pushing, saying it's the best thing in the world. And the best way to figure it out is have some really smart people who understand Proposition 1 onto the show. So let me just bring you over to this screen here. So, John, let me just ask you to explain what a proposition is,
Yeah.
and what's the purpose of a proposition.
Yeah. That's a good spot to start, Sean, and that's where I guess I wanted to start too. Sean, this being a former mayor, you have your city code, you have your city charter. And basically at the local level, sometimes you can just do a resolution to change something, sometimes you got to do a local law. Well, at the state level, we have all these chapters in the law, but we also have what's called the state constitution. In the state constitution, either items go in the state constitution to a constitutional amendment or a constitutional convention. Now, we haven't had a constitutional convention in the state of New York in probably 30 or 40 years. And I don't know if we'll ever see one again or not, because that would be that's all actually another whole show if you want to talk about that sometime. But a constitutional amendment, and they've been happening, I think in my time in the legislature now, we've probably had 7 or 8 constitutional amendments. And basically what they're doing is taking it from the existing laws, so the laws that currently exist, and putting it in the Constitution if the public supports it, which is why the referendum is there. So therefore, if the public needs to support the referendum to go into the Constitution, then for it to ever change, it's going to have to be removed by a referendum. And to be honest with you, I think where you've got people excited about it because they believe that they're, for example, protecting women's reproductive rights. They feel this is the best way to cement this, although they're finding out now the language is probably not to their liking. And there's other people who are not supportive of that initiative and are upset because they were kind of hoping the law would get changed someday down the road. And now it's probably not, it may or may not get to. I don't know how this is going to turn out. But they know it's a much more difficult thing to go back and remove something from the Constitution.
So, John, real quick.
That's the mechanism. That's the mechanics.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you, though, how it gets written. Who writes it up?
The bill itself, right? So
Yeah.
basically, this had to be passed by two successive legislatures. So that doesn't mean 2 years in a row, by the way. That means 3 years ago and this past year, the legislature passed this legislation to allow it to go to question, to
Right.
go to
Proposition. Right.
go to proposition, go to the public.
Hmm.
The interesting dynamic, and this is where there's been a lot of confusion, and this is why, Sean, I think you've been getting a lot of comments about this over the last 4 or 5 months. Eventually, the Attorney General's office and the Executive Chamber and the Board of Elections play a role in exactly how it's supposed to be proposed, even the term. So you see it there, Equal Rights Amendment. All right, it amends Section 1, Section 11 of the New York State Constitution. Now protects against unequal treatment based on race, color, creed, and relation. Everybody can read.
It's there. Right.
So, I mean, when you look at it on its surface, you say, well, okay, we want everybody to treat equally. So no unequal treatment based on their ethnicity, their national origin, their age, disability, sex, la-di-da-di-da. On its surface, it sounds good, but I will tell you that those on the left that are championing women's reproductive health wanted it to basically be very specific towards reproductive health. And that's not what was allowed to go forward. So it's interesting because I think as much as you may be hearing from one side more than the other, I think you've got disenchantment on both sides, which I think is going to lead to an interesting outcome. And by the way, Sean, I mentioned to you earlier before I got on, we've been, and this goes on about 2 or 3 years ago, we had a constitutional amendment out for the public in regards to does everybody have a right to clean water and clean air, which passed overwhelmingly, but we were advised by counsel that we cannot be out there promoting for or against it. So I'm going to be taking the middle of the road, trying to explain what's happening here, but trying to also clear up any myths or questions that can come up. There's a lot of...
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So
the governor came out. The governor came out.
Yeah.
And basically talks about abortion. Okay. And in the speech that I heard her talking about, she was saying the Equal Rights Amendment, the proposition is going to, protect abortion. Now, for me, I know, and I think you know, and I think everybody who lives in New York State, one of the most liberal, bluest states, abortion is pretty much concrete here in this state. And we have laws in there that do protect currently the right to abortion. So the funny thing about the proposition, and this is where I want to kind of pick your brain. I think it's important for people to understand that a proposition is not a law, right? It's codifying the laws into the Constitution, right? So now you have a constitutional right to not be discriminated against based on all of these pigeonholes that we placed in here, right? You can't be discriminated against age, disability, sex, sexual orientation, blah, 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 blah. So here's the problem that I have. We have all of these laws in the state of New York, and they have kind of been pigeonholed out because the legislature has said in its wisdom, and rightfully so, people mature at a different age. Certain things should be done at a certain age. Driving your car at a certain age, having sex at a certain age, getting married at a certain age. And I'm using age because I think it's the easiest thing for people to frame into this conversation. What happens now when you put into the Constitution and you give people these legal rights to have a protection under a Constitution that just now says age? No number, just age. How does that not cause an enormous amount of conflict with all of the laws that we have in the state now that are age related? So let's just say I'm 17 years old, 18 years old. Let's say I'm 18 years old. I joined the military and I come home and I want to have a beer. But it says that in New York State, you have to be 21. And we know that there's a federal law, but let's just use the state law, right? The federal law says if the state doesn't accept 21, you lose your federal funds. But the state makes and regulates the 21. Why can't I now sue the state of New York saying I'm being discriminated against based on age because I'm 19, He's 21. You've set up the standard where you're now discriminating because I'm not old enough. How does the state handle that? Same thing with, a girl and a guy who are having sex. He's 20, she's 17. She's supposed to be 18. I'm just using the number. I thought it was 16, but I don't know. But you understand what I'm saying? We're taking all these laws that were kind of separate because the state legislature in its wisdom, and I believe it has wisdom, make sure that we don't have kids driving cars at 10. Make sure we don't have girls having sex and getting married at 13, right? Making sure, people are drinking responsibly so we make it 21. You have taken the laws and now you conflict with the state amendment.
I'd like to throw something in here too, Sean, real quick too. You also, John, you also have basically people who have concealed carry guns opposed to people who are only issued hunting and targeting, okay, to be able to have a gun at that in that means, okay? So if it's equal rights, does that mean you get rid of the hunting and targeting and everybody is concealed? And I guess this is the point that Sean is making, because it just seems that it's becoming generic, okay, if I use the right word.
Well, I think you're right, Tim, because here's go ahead, John.
Let me try to answer both of it, because
Yeah.
I've been around with you guys long enough to know that we could be going on for 12 hours.
Sure.
With our conversations. In reality, as the laws of New York State exist today,
Hmm.
nothing is changing. So, Sean, if that 17-year-old wanted to challenge the 21 age limit, they could challenge it today, and it would go through part of the court system. However, when it goes to the Constitution, it goes to the Court of Appeals. It goes to the highest court in this state. And I think that's, and once again, I want to reinforce what I said earlier, is there is, if this is approved,
Hmm.
the Constitution is much more difficult to reverse. And I think because it's going to have to go back to the public. And I think that's where this is where a lot of different things. You can pick any topic, whether you want to pick conceal and carry, underage drinking, getting married at 13, whatever it may be. The bottom line is what this does do is it makes it more difficult to reverse this. Now, I see questions coming up too, so I'm going to just answer this that Mark got there.
Mark
If
Delano,
you don't-
yeah.
Yeah, if you don't put a yes or a no, then there's no vote. I mean, the
There's no
reality,
vote.
you got to mark
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
he just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, good. If you see the questions, spit them out.
Yeah.
There, Mark is right. If you don't vote, you don't vote. Here's the problem: if you don't vote, and you don't want the proposition, and there are more people voting yes, and you could have voted no, you may have won the proposition and knocked it down. Not taking a position is, in a sense, taking a position, right?
What do we
But
say?
John,
You and I have hit the doors for probably 18 different times in our careers, and bottom line is, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain.
Yeah, well, you can't bitch,
Get
right?
out there and vote. Get out there and vote.
I want to just go back and circle back. I agree with what you're saying, right? So once you put something into the Constitution, it's harder to change than a law,
Yep.
right?
Right.
But I'm still stuck on this part, John. I'm still stuck on the part when you put something in the Constitution, you give somebody constitutional rights. That gives somebody a lot more power over themselves in making the argument, wait a minute, I can sue now because I'm constitutionally, laws get dealt with in the court system all the time, right? But
Yep.
constitutional rights is a whole different ballgame.
It is. And
It is changing because age is now just age instead of having age like 16, 19, 18.
Mhm, yeah.
I was looking at some of the laws in the state of New York, and there's a whole host of them.
And some would say there's too many, but that's a different day.
Well, there may be too many
Yeah.
because I think we all start thinking, that people that go to war that come home should be able to have a beer. But I get it.
Right.
Look, we've
Yeah.
made our decisions in life to say there has to be limitations. Let me use another example. So you can't discriminate no more once this becomes part of, and I'm going to keep going back to discriminate because that's what it protects.
Right, but just not to cut you off, but don't forget a lot of these things, pretty much all these things, you can't discriminate now.
Yeah.
Understood,
There are already laws in the books in New York,
Yeah.
but now it rises to a higher level. But go
right.
ahead.
There's a difference between a law that you try to argue and you get shot down because the legislature is very powerful in making these laws, and the courts will say, "Hey, the legislature made this law. We're not here to be the lawmakers, right?" But constitutionally, now they just have to answer the question: did my constitutional rights get violated? So let's just take another simple one, and I want to stay simple because I'm simple, and I want people to be able to figure this out simply. I go to Smith's Restaurant in Cohoes, and they have a special that if you're 55 or older, you get 15% off. Well, John McDonald walks in with his family, and he's not 55, he's only 45, he wishes. And he can't get that discount. Is it possible that somebody could say, well, I'm going to sue you because now you're discriminating against me?
Well, I
Because
think
now,
yeah, I don't believe that in that case for this reason. There's probably, and not one of us on this call is a lawyer, but I can tell you there's generations of case law that businesses are allowed to give discounts to individuals as long as they do it fairly. Now the question may be why you're giving people 55 and over a discount or not, but I don't want to pick that fight with AARP.
Right, and they do it. Look, they do that also with people such as veterans. I can go to Home Depot and get a veterans
Auburn
discount.
County, Sean,
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
Auburn County had
sure.
a program.
no, I'm
Yeah.
all in favor of them.
Right.
I am in
Right.
favor of them. I
Sure.
just think personally, and I did reach out to some people that are very sharp attorneys. Most attorneys that I talk to are drooling at the mouth because there's about 30 years of lawsuits that they think is going to take place over these things. And they shared when I had the conversation with them, they said, well, there's a difference between a law and a constitutional right. And if your constitutional rights are violated, that's a big problem, and that's a very expensive problem. And many of those on the side that kind of side with me believe that there's a conflict. There's a banging of heads between the current laws and how they're written and the Constitution, because one is now lumping all of these people into one place where the laws pigeonhole them in a whole bunch of different places based on age and a whole other host of reasons. So now you have added gender identity, gender expression, right? How does that open up Pandora's box for men to use women's locker rooms in the state of New York?
Yeah. Well, in regards to, I'm sorry, I'm working through a cold here.
So was Sean. Yep.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. What you're quite.
So my question is not.
The laws currently in place are not changing. So gender identity, gender expression, those are actually been on the books for several years,
Right.
federally and state.
Right.
Once again, I think some people believe by having this amendment, if it passes in the Constitution, it protects them even more. But Sean, I'm not going to disagree with you with the fact that, listen, there are a lot of attorneys out there that understand the law, but also understand the different interpretations. And I've always said to people, be careful what you ask for. You might actually get it. It may open up more questions than provide answers.
Yeah, and let me throw something at you.
It all depends on our attorney's going to be that passionate about it to take the risk to do the work, to find the resources.
So
fighting. Right now, are they fighting a fight? Fighting.
Yeah. So John, here's something that I see on TV where they're talking about using the term natural origin, okay, and how that may give illegals an opportunity to vote. But the voting laws, I think, are pretty set, and you could probably answer this best. I think that if you're a non-citizen, okay, say a non-citizen that lives in Cohoes, now I'm not sure if it applies in New York State, but it may in other states where a non-citizen who lives in a community may be able to vote in such as like a local school board election, or be able to vote for a local city election, something like that, opposed to a federal election as what this thing. So this proposition is basically New York, and it wouldn't extend into the federal jurisdiction, I don't think, at all.
Well, on voting rights, and let me be very clear. Those individuals who are not citizens of this state or this
Yeah.
country can vote in any elections, period, the end, state, federal, local. New York City,
You said they can or they can't.
they cannot. They
Cannot.
cannot.
Right.
There is a mechanism if a local school district or if a local city,
Yeah.
New York City did go through the mechanism several years ago of trying to allow non-citizens to vote, which I did not support. You got to remember back when, I'm just going to go back memory lane a little bit. You remember the
Yeah.
Green Light Bill that basically was providing licenses to non-citizens.
Hmm.
And I understood the rationale. The bottom line is there are a lot of undocumented here, a lot of them that are working, and they're actually taxpayers because they have an IT number and they have taxes taken out of their pay, but they couldn't get a driver's license. So I understood the intent. But my biggest fear when I said, explain to me how this works. Oh, it's like anything else. You walk into DMV, you apply for your motorist license, and you can then click on the button and become a registered voter. I said, time out. Are you telling me DMV is going to be checking to make sure they're citizens? Oh, no. I said, and that's why I voted no on the bill. I caught a lot of grief in Albany about it because I had 40% of districts in Albany. I said, I'm not against those individuals who are trying to come and make a better life for themselves and their families and paying their taxes. Not opposed to that. But the reality is this. They got to be citizens to be able to be part of our elections. No ifs, ands, or doubts about that. And
So
You made the right call.
so and you know it's the right thing to do. You know that.
I think in
It
that
is.
particular case, you did make the right call. I have a fear, however, that on the local elections, which are not overseen by the federal government, right? Local elections are local elections. That New York City is in a lawsuit because they want to let illegal immigrants vote for the mayor and other council positions.
Yep.
When the
I
state,
don't support that. Just to be very clear, I don't think it's right.
Yeah.
But
are
I
you-
don't live down there either.
are you
so.
acquiescing it, John, just by the fact that if now the Equal Rights Amendment of the New York State Charter says that you can't discriminate against people based on their point of origin? So
Natural origin.
indirectly, my concern, indirectly here, hear me out, both of you, right? Indirectly, somebody comes to Cohoes, they're not a citizen, they want to vote, we say you can't, and they go back to the Constitution and says, in the New York State Constitution, I cannot be discriminated against based on my national origin, where I came from. Isn't
Right.
there an argument to be made?
Let me try to clear that up.
And
because
it says natural origin, not national. Natural origin. So you can clarify that, John.
in another part of the Constitution that covers voting, it's very clear who can and cannot vote. And this proposition does not what they call enfranchise or allow any new classes of voters. Bottom line is you need to be a citizen of this country to be eligible to register to vote. No ifs, ands, or doubts about it.
Okay, good.
So
they
you're
are-
not concerned? You're not concerned, though, that this could cause
Now, just to be clear, I'm more concerned that a law will be coming through to the legislature that we have to consider that would allow them, because we could do that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're going to. I'm not going to support that. I don't care. And listen, I know many undocumented that are part of our community.
And they're
plan
good
us out.
people, too.
They're great people. I have no problem. But the truth of the matter is, the one big, and this is particularly respectful to those people who served our country or have lost their lives in our country. You got to be a citizen to vote.
Well, and you have a simple naturalization process to give them that citizenship.
Right.
Spend 5 years here, keep your nose clean, put in your application, and within 6 months, you're naturalized as a U.S.
Again,
citizen.
at the end of the day,
That's
people
simple.
need to come to this country the right way.
Legally.
Because if 10,000 people cross the border and 10 of them are murderers, rapists, or whatever, the rest of the good people are irrelevant. Because you can't pick them out and say, I looked at all the people and they all look good to me, right? Within the group of people that are coming over, there's bad people, which makes the good people irrelevant to the argument, doesn't it?
I've been saying we'll see what next Tuesday brings. Whoever the next president is going to be, whether it's a he or a she, I hope they put this issue to bed once and for all.
It needs to
To be honest with you, I've been saying it for the last 6 presidents. It's a travesty because, as you all know, we are all sons and daughters of immigrants.
Yeah.
My great grandparents came here,
Yep.
and with the same, everybody had the same nickel in their pocket. I don't know how that happened, but the truth of the matter is, they all came here. But I want to mention one more thing in regards to national origin. Just to be clear, New York State's not breaking any new ground by doing this. Let me share with you the states that I'm aware of that already have national origin in under equal protection in their constitutions: Alaska, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida. I wouldn't consider that a liberal bastion. Massachusetts, Nebraska's not a liberal bastion. Nevada, New Hampshire is purple as purple gets. Texas and Virginia. Now, why they did it, I don't know. Everyone's different, right? I mean, I could see where Florida and Texas are probably at a point where, as much as you're right, Sean, the 10 bad actors that ruin things, they've also welcomed the tens of thousands of other people that have contributed to their economy and their community. So they made that decision down the road. But just to be clear, New York State is actually not breaking ground on this.
No, I just think the problem is that New York State is as liberal as they come, and they usually follow all the crazy shit that goes on in California, and so I'm concerned.
Yeah,
I've made this argument to everybody, right? And I know it may sound like a piss poor argument to make, but I personally look at Trump and I look at Kamala Harris. And the only things that really concern me, because I don't know if any one of the two can fix the problems that we are faced right now in the country. I worry about the things that personally affect me and my family, just like you guys, right? My moral compass has an issue with, young girls having to, compete with boys in sports and boys going into girls' locker rooms and those, competing for, you work your ass off your whole life and you go to college and you lose your scholarship to some guy who could never win in a men's race. Those things bother me. So my decision on who I'm going to vote for are based on those things, right?
Yeah.
So my problem with Proposition 1 really comes down to this. I cannot be convinced because I know all these great lawyers. I know how the game's played. I know how, you open up Pandora's box and it causes more problems than you ever thought were going to happen. I think Proposition 1 takes all of the laws that we have in the state that have, as I said, have been pigeonholed for a certain reason, lumps them now all into one constitutional protection. And there'll be constant competition between their constitutional rights and the laws in the state. And what happens to the law if it conflicts with the Constitution? The law is wrong.
Well, what Constitution are you talking about?
The
state or the
Constitution,
federal?
Albany, New York State.
Okay.
This is an amendment to the state constitution. Federal constitution only can be made.
But this is New York State, Timmy. That's the whole point of Proposition 1, right? So in New York State,
Yeah, but there's supremacy, Sean, okay?
what is that, Timmy?
Well, supremacy is, New York State can't do things that, violate federal. And
None of this has anything to do with federal.
Well, actually, it can if natural origin implies that illegals can vote.
Well, I'm going to disagree because I do believe that there's nothing in the federal law that prohibits illegals from voting in local elections. Not that I know of. And I looked and I talked to some people, and there's some very gray areas in there, right? You can't vote in a federal election.
Right.
But
that's why I asked John earlier about whether they can vote in local elections.
Now, New York City, John, if I'm not mistaken, tried to let the illegals vote.
A local government, whether it's a school district or whether it's a library district or whether it's a city, they can make that request. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to stand up in a court of law, depending on how it's written. And obviously, New York City's, which was passed 3 years ago, I think Adams was going to veto it, but it's been held up. It's not going anywhere at this stage.
No, it's stuck. It is stuck. And luckily, because I think people I think all good human beings embrace the fact that we all got here from another place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't just let people jump over. We talk, John, you're a pharmacist. That you should be able to, substantiate this with me, right? We have eradicated diseases that other countries haven't. We have vaccinations that other countries don't have. You see chicken pox, you see measles, you see other tuberculosis. Right now, there's a case in Texas of illegal immigrant that came over that has tuberculosis that's maybe that's the wrong word, but it doesn't respond to antibiotics. When we came over, and I'm not saying me, but our families back then, they came over, they had to be vaccinated, they had to be checked, they had medical screenings, they had background screenings. I'm all for it. I want people to come here.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I think the problem has been is that the volume over the last 40 or 50 years has ticked up dramatically because people, actually, the United States is a great place to live. Granted, we have our differences and we're going to have our bitches and our moans, but the truth of the matter is we are one of the freest nations in the world.
Best country in the world.
No doubt about it. And at the same token, both Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals have failed to improve the system. As you know, Senator Langford, a very conservative senator from Oklahoma, drafted up something that we thought could work, and it did not come to be. And you know what? Hopefully, with the next president, they'll re-earth that and bring it up. Because to Sean's question, why are they still able to come in here? Well, they're able to come in because some can claim asylum, and that can be sometimes taken advantage of. I'm not going to be telling you it's not going to be. But at the same token, we want to welcome people with open arms, but we want to make sure they're not carrying any arms in where they're coming, right?
Well, that's a good point. So, jumping back to the Equal Rights Amendment, if I understand you can't advocate for it, so I don't want to say you're advocating
for or against it.
Right. But if
what's nice, John, is you're clarifying a lot of things, which is good.
Well, Timmy, I got to be honest with you. I think that both sides clarified their position, right?
Yeah,
because honest to God, I think John has been just saying, hey, this is my opinion. This is, Liz came on the show, said this is her opinion. Yep. And I have an opinion, and you have an opinion, and I talk to attorneys. And
when I look at it, just for me, when I look at it, to me, as I said off air, okay, to me it appears ambiguous. And when something appears ambiguous where, there's debate on either side, generally that's where you're going to see a host of lawsuits and all these other things that clarify those things. So I don't think this moves anything.
No, I think, John, if I asked you this question, if you can answer it, fine. If you can't, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see an enormous amount of conflict that will lead to a lot of litigation because we now have the Constitution, in essence, competing against some of the very laws that are drafted, because the Constitution now removes all of the pigeonholes of ages and just says age? So doesn't that kind of just make it so broad that somebody can say, maybe I'll file a lawsuit on that?
That was my point of being ambiguous.
It very well may happen, John. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. It depends on how passionate and how many resources people have that they want to fight it. And to be honest with you, I think you're going to see some lawsuits coming from those people who are very conservative and deep in their feelings about that. But I also think if this does get passed, I think you're going to see actually some people from the left filing lawsuits too. But that's America. You have that right to, if you're not happy, you can take it to the courts and try to make a decision. And it's funny, and we've been around long enough, all of us, that it's very interesting how cases make their way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And what people never really look at is who originated things. And usually it's an attorney general in either a red or blue state who found an opening to have an argument. And it makes its way through the state courts, and then eventually it gets its way up there. It's very interesting how items get there. And they're not all controversial like this topic or the topics within this amendment. Sometimes it's, topics that deal with pharmacy benefits, for lack of a better term. I use that because I know it's going to the Supreme Court and been decided.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, I think the biggest issue here is this for me. I always say, is this a good intent or is this a sinister intent? Because I believe sometimes there are people who push an agenda. We're a pluralist society. There's groups of people that want their agenda pushed, right? I don't like the fact that it's called an equal rights amendment and then it's sold to everybody as an abortion prop. At least the people that I've talked to and the politicians that I talked to, and the governor even came out and argued that this is an abortion protection equal rights amendment. If that was the case, they could have just put a simple line in the Constitution like they do for religion, basically saying abortion is an absolute right. It can't be taken away, can't be changed, blah, blah, blah. I'm concerned that there's a little more behind it because I don't understand the purpose of adding all of these other protections that grant people constitutional rights based on certain things like gender identity, gender expression. To me, what is gender expression? I feel like a girl today, so I'm going to go in the girls' room. You tell me I can't, I file a lawsuit because you can't discriminate against me for that. That's the stuff that I see problematic.
But to be clear, I know there's the whole thing going on about boys playing girls sports. That discussion, both state and federally, was addressed several years ago. I can't remember if it was under the Trump or the Obama administration. But the reality is this: boys cannot play on girls' teams. There are
John, it's happening. It's happening
there
every
are,
day.
there are districts that are allowing girls to play on guys' teams. That's happening.
Well, girls have always played on guy sports. You know why? Because there is only one sport.
Right.
So if you wanted to be a wrestler and you're a girl, if there's only one sport.
In Bethlehem, there was a boy and a girls soccer team last year, and this girl the district made a decision to allow her to play in the boys' team. In Waterford, they have both a girl and a boys' team, and the girl wanted to play on the boys' team to get to a higher level competition. She's extremely good.
Yeah, and you'll see female field goal kickers playing on football teams.
At the end of the day,
like that.
You can't argue for protections.
But the girls aren't changing. They are female. It's not. I guess what we're talking about here is a guy who is all guy, okay, claiming to be female in some way, to play on a female team. And so that's the difference between girls that want to play on a boys' team. They're the natural born females. We're talking about the difference here of what you would say someone who's mentally says, "Hey, I'm a female." You're even seeing it in prisons, John, where guys are going to prison and they're pretending to be women to get into the women's side of prisons and stuff. It's happening. I think all these things are happening.
I think that we are becoming a society that's trying to please everybody.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no such society. There's no utopia that pleases everybody,
right?
Based on some kind of, and I don't want to be mean about it, but you know what? I believe there's a mental illness component to some of these things that they should at least be given an opportunity to have some kind of counseling and work through it. And then when you're 21 or 19 or 18, you want to do something. Now you're a grown up. You do what you have to do, right? Yeah. But I think when it comes to kids, I'm very happy that there's laws on the book that outlaw kids from having these surgeries. Right. But I am concerned. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
That's not changing.
I'm not saying the law's changing, but I'm concerned that through the amendment, the proposition, now that it is in there giving them constitutional rights, that constitutional right will clash with the law and they'll be in court. And I think that's where it will start. The LGBT community probably has enough money to say, hey, we could fight this. We'll take it all the way as far as we have to, because in the state of New York, you can no longer go after anybody for gender expression, gender identity. John, I passed the first ever transgender law in Albany County. Mm-hmm. 25 years they tried to get it passed. I became the chairman of the legislature, and I felt that they deserved the rights. Right. But I remember meeting with them saying, don't ask me to go in the girls' room. Don't ask me to play in girls' sports, but human rights, I'm all in favor of it. You should be able to go to work, get an apartment, You
You
know,
know, it's
live your life.
have you noticed lately with the newer restaurants, they don't even have, they're all gender neutral bathrooms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's amazing. It, I guess we're getting gray in the tooth, right? The world is changing before us. And I think this is, to be honest with you, this is the difficulty for people to really grasp these things because it's not something you grew up in. Listen, showing credit to you, Cohoes isn't exactly going to be considered the progressive bastion of the world. We know that. But, as chair of the legislature, you sat down with the folks and had a discussion and said, okay, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, and you push it through, which is
And John, I was at the bank the other day, right? And usually I don't pay attention to the little things, but the teller had his name on his badge, okay, and underneath his badge he had his/him
him. Yeah,
on
yeah.
it,
Now,
okay.
a lot of people like the pronouns. I'm good
Yeah,
with John. I'm good with John. I think you're good with Tim, and you're good
yeah.
with you.
So I'm saying,
I just
well,
think it's
geez,
important that the state of New York
yeah,
is a leader, right? Because I want to think that the state of New York can be a leader. I've always been a Democrat, but I got to be honest with you. I'm far more conservative than most Democrats in New York. I'm not a very left. I was
Right.
always a moderate
You're
Democrat.
a Kennedy Democrat, a working
Yeah,
class Democrat.
I always was a moderate Democrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I used to say I'm maybe more of a conservative when it comes to spending your money. When I was the mayor of the city, like you were, John, you certainly weren't throwing out the
Oh,
shingles at the
yeah,
negotiating table. That's
you
for
know
sure.
that. You know that. Hey, as a union president, you were pretty liberal. And that's
Well, I was a
good.
little liberal for the union, right? But I mean, when
You're
it came to when
fighting
it
for the
comes
numbers.
to yeah, when it comes to all these liberal things, I'm not so liberal. I'm a father
Yeah,
of daughters. I'm a grandfather of all three granddaughters and one grandson. I worry about their future.
yeah,
I guess every generation has the next Elvis Presley coming up, where the parents go, "Oh my God," and we've all survived it. This is
yeah,
getting a little different because now we're in a generation where trying to identify men and women has actually become an argument.
yeah.
And for me, sometimes I think I just want to, go lay on the beach and drink some beer and just let the next group of people fight these fights because
You know, I,
it's
I've
crazy.
always I've always thought about it. We're all pretty much contemporaries. We're in that 55 to 65 range. I'll be kind to all of us. But I've always wondered, as I see my parents and what they've gone through, what their parents were thinking when they were going through that phase. Because change is going to happen whether we want to be a part of it or not. And the reality is, this is a question that the public should educate themselves on. Their views are going to probably dictate where they're going to land on it. I encourage people at least flip it over and take a look at it, and hopefully they study up on it before they go in, so they make their informed decision, whatever they may be, and whatever it may be. Trust me, the world does not stop when the election.
Yeah, you're
yeah.
right. Hey, John, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate getting your point
Anytime.
of view. I will continue to, advocate for people to vote. You'll have to make your
Absolutely.
own. You'll have to make your own decisions, and at least now we have two perspectives of the proposition. So God
Back
bless
in the
you.
back in the early days, Eddie Clark used to say, "Vote early, vote often." Now I just say, "Vote early, but just vote once."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, listen.
There's going to be enough confusion going on.
There's enough confusion in the voting process
Congrats,
now.
Eddie Clark.
Hey, God bless
Well,
everybody. John, I'll talk to you later.
well, Sean, what I'd like to do is have an office nice like John McDonald's. So, how do I
Hey,
get that under Proposition 1?
that's his beautiful house. He's got an office.
Yeah.
Listen, I can appreciate John's positions. I
Yep.
really can. I have leaned a little more towards, without question, Liz, right?
Yeah.
Because I personally do believe, based on 15 years of a lawmaker, right? I'm not no dummy. I've
Yeah.
been part of
Yeah.
the process for a long time. I do personally believe that the conflict between the laws in place now and the constitutional amendment will
Yeah.
clash. And I believe the LGTB group, community, they will be the first ones with the pockets of money to file a lawsuit soon as one of them is discriminated against.
Yeah.
I can see a lawyer saying, "Hey, he's only 17 and she's 16. You can't say that having sex with the 16 at 17 is
Even if it's
rape."
consensual,
And,
right? Because
right,
it was
because you see that
consensual.
happen all the time, right?
Yeah.
but
So
now I can see a lawyer saying, "Whoa, time out. She's being discriminated against because now she's 16 and you're saying you have to be 18, but the Constitution
Yeah.
doesn't say that no longer." So I believe that a law does not supersede the Constitution. No different than a
Yeah.
labor agreement cannot supersede New York state law, right? Think of
Yeah.
it this way. If you're in a union, and I want to use it because I know a lot of union people watch our show. In my contract, I have all these benefits and all of this, all of this language that we negotiate, right?
mhm,
But
yeah.
there's a part in there that says if any of the language conflicts with New York state law or federal law, it becomes null and void, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
nobody can negotiate higher standard than the law or
Right.
circumvent the law. The Constitution is your highest level of protection, which means I am a state of New York resident. And because I am a resident, this Constitution gives me all of these rights and protections. And you
Yeah.
can't create a law that conflicts with the very Constitution because 95% of the time, Timmy, laws that get thrown out why? Because they conflict with the
Yeah.
Constitution, be it the
But-
federal Constitution, the state Constitution, the city charter, right? There's
Right.
all
Well,
of
the
these-
city charter, which is home run rule, okay, that even has a provision in there, okay, that does state that when there's a conflict of laws within our own charter, the harsher or most strict of the two applies. Okay.
Well, they all,
But they still can be ambiguous, okay? And for people who don't know what that means, it means that it's hard, you can't interpret what it means.
Right.
Open to interpretation. And I think that Proposition 1, Sean, is what you're smacking at. It's open to interpretation, and that's why you're going to see all the
well,
lawsuits.
all I can say is that, and if you're listening to the show,
Yeah.
in the easiest way to explain why I can't support it,
hmm
okay, I can't guarantee you that all of the things that Liz came on and said will happen.
Yeah.
I can't. But I can guarantee you the opening is now there when it wasn't before.
hmm
And I can tell you this in the easiest way to explain it. In the United States, we have a constitution. Cohoes can't pass a law. New York can't pass a law. California can't pass a law that says you don't have free speech. You can't do a podcast
Right.
because we don't like what you're saying,
Mhm.
right?
That's
And
true.
the reason they
Yeah.
can't do that is why? Because of the Constitution
It's
of the
written
United
in the
States.
federal Constitution.
So if they came and said to me, "We're shutting you down," and they shut me down, what would I do? I'd file a lawsuit
Yeah.
saying that my constitutional right to free speech has been violated,
yeah.
right? Now that same principle lies here in the state of New York. If the state of New York says that you have a state constitutional right based on I can't discriminate against age, your sexual preference, your gender identity, if you can't discriminate against those things, and I have a bill that says men can't use female locker rooms. Let's just take the
Yeah.
whole purpose. Let's take the transgender part out of it. It just says men can't use female locker rooms.
Or play female
Well, am I
sports.
being discriminated against to use that locker room because now the charter says I can't be discriminated against?
Yeah.
I don't know. Confusing, crazy. This world is upside down, and the shit that's going on in this world would make everybody go, "What the hell is going on?"
Yeah.
And I think John is right in one sense when he says that the laws won't change. I don't think they will. But once that law is applied, and now the Constitution has added protections that weren't around when that law was made,
yeah.
right? Do they conflict and cause a whole bunch of problems? Yes, they do. I see it happening. New York is prone for all these type of issues, just like California is prone.
Well, I
And
think,
so-
Sean, too, is, you wouldn't have a proposition placed before us okay, if it didn't imply changes.
Well, you're right, and one of the problems that I have is that everybody is putting this constitutional amendment, Proposition One,
Yeah,
as a way to protect people's right to an abortion.
yeah,
That's really what the argument was when they started this proposition.
yeah,
And you and I both know that there's all kinds of laws in the state protection abortion.
yeah,
We also know that New York State is the most liberal state outside of California.
yeah.
So abortion is never going to go away. Okay.
Mhm.
And in order to change the law, they're going to have the Assembly, the Senate. We
Yeah.
have had Republican governors,
Yeah,
but they never had the luxury of having the Republican Assembly and the Republican Senate. So none of the shit that they wanted ever got through.
yeah,
So if you're telling me that you have to change the whole Constitution and add all of these new titles in order to protect abortion, I'm going to call bullshit.
mhm,
Okay. If you're trying to appease a whole bunch of people by saying, see, New York gives everybody equal rights without being concerned about how they're going to conflict and what problems they're going to cause, I see why they're doing this, right?
yeah,
They're politicians. They have to look at all of the communities and say, yeah, you're the gay community. Look at, we're putting this in there for you. The transgender community, we're putting that in there for you. People that are pregnant, we're putting that in there for you. And vote for me because look at us.
yeah.
We're taking care of you
Yeah.
without worrying about the consequences. Because guess what? They don't have to worry about the
Right.
consequences.
And that's why I asked John. It says someone had to write this up. Okay. This just didn't come out of the blue. So I think it was something that was like a snowball going downhill and just slowly getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'll tell you how it starts,
We
Timmy.
ended up with a proposition.
It starts with California and those crazy
Yeah.
assholes out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care what anybody says when I post things on Facebook and
Yeah.
I go, bullshit.
Yeah.
I just watched on not CNN and not Fox,
Hmm.
but another news channel where the
Yep.
mother was explaining how her 11-year-old son was removed from her house by Child Protective
Hmm. Yeah.
because she did not support the transitioning process of an 11-year-old boy to turn into a girl.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
Who the
that's
hell is
happening.
the government of any state to come in and say, because you don't want your kid to transition and they're only 11, that you are going to lose your kid? And they take the kid. And I said, that will never happen.
It'll
The
never
lady's on
happen.
TV, unless this lady's bullshitting everybody. But you know
Yeah.
what? It appears that it is what it is. They took her kid, and now she's in the battle.
And the same thing with that Mr. Hannon is his last name that Liz was talking about. Liz-
Absolutely.
like
Trying to chase to get his kid back.
trying to get his kid back, okay? Because and it's the government trying to take his kid.
Yeah. So,
So
I
anyway,
would tell you,
yeah.
I will tell you this, and I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
If you don't think it could happen, it's going to happen. There's
Yeah.
nothing that we have talked about other than trying to build a Frankenstein from a bunch of dead bodies out of a cemetery that doesn't have the ability to happen. And some of it is happening now.
Yeah.
So why put ourselves in a position with any proposition that says vote for this because all this may happen, or you just don't vote it at all? And we live in a state that already has protections for all these people.
Well, you know, Sean,
And then
I'm
the
gonna
politicians are stuck
right.
because they're the
Yeah.
only ones that can change the law.
I'm going to refer to the movie War Games, where the end was they wanted to play tic-tac-toe. And the reason why they did that was because there was no winners, and it was it was an easy game, okay, that you there wasn't a way to lose. And I feel with this proposition myself, I don't see an upside. So I'm uncomfortable, me personally, voting yes on this thing because I just don't trust what could happen in the future.
Why vote for something
Yeah,
that everybody knows
Yeah.
could lead to a whole bunch of
something
problems?
else. Yeah,
Right. When right now,
yeah,
if you just left the status quo
yeah,
everybody has the protections anyway.
Yeah.
The only thing this thing does is takes all of the groups of people, lumps them into one umbrella,
Yep.
puts them into the Constitution in the state of New York, and says, now all of you have equal protections.
Right.
When in fact, all of the laws that we have are based on a whole host of different types of, I always say
Yep.
pigeonholes, right?
Yeah.
But age related. So for example, again, driving at 16, girls, a guy 17 having sex with a girl who's 16, 21 to drink beer, and I'm going to come back from the war and I'm going to fight it and say, why can't I? You're discriminating against me. That's what discrimination is, right?
Mhm, yeah.
Allowing one group of people to do something over the other group of people.
Yeah.
The only law that gives, or the only protection that they get for those type of lawsuits is the constitutions. Otherwise, there's just laws. And
Yeah.
courts don't really listen to laws. You know what courts do? Courts say, let's check and make sure it doesn't violate the Constitution, federal or state. And if it doesn't, we're getting out of it, because that's the whole point of lawmakers. That's the whole point of a legislature.
Yeah.
Right? So if I sue tomorrow saying that I am 19 and I want to have a freaking beer, I just got home from Afghanistan, had my arm blown off, and I want to have a
Yep.
freaking beer,
Yeah.
and you're telling me I can't because I'm 21,
Yeah.
he now has a right under the state constitution to say I'm being discriminated against.
Mhm.
Where before you stick that age in there that just has age and it doesn't have any other reasons of age,
Yeah.
he only had the law that said 21.
Yeah.
He can't fight the law because the courts are going to say, hey, the
And
state
that's
legislature.
right. And that's
passed
the point
the law.
Liz was making, okay, where by simply using the term age, it supplants all the various different ages for this, for that, and for this,
Well,
for
it
that.
does.
And
It
that's
does.
what her
And-
point was. And you know what? I think she has a good point. Okay.
Well, listen, Timmy,
So-
I'm going to leave with this because I'm going to go watch the rest of the Yankees. They are up 4-0, just so
I
you
know,
know.
and I'm watching.
Judge
it
hit a
too.
2-run homer, just so
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
David Lancier, I just wanted to throw out a big I love you, David. I know you're not watching my show right now. You're watching the Yankee game, but I am so proud of you. I'm so happy that the community got behind you. I think it was Jeff, one of the nicest, most caring guys I've ever met in my life. And Yankee Trails, yeah, David's been on you guys, your buses so many times. He'll call me up.
Yeah.
I used to drive him back and forth to the buses, and so did so many other people. Thank you for what you've done to the most wonderful guy that you could ever be blessed by the good Lord to call your friend, David Lancier. So, David, I love you.
Yep.
Jimmy, with that, I'm out of here. It's good to see you, and we'll talk soon.
Take care. Good night.